Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokémon card collecting podcast with Dan Norton and David Person.
Hey, Dan from the future here, editing Dan. Just to say, during this episode, as you will probably hear us talk about, we had a few issues with my internet and with recording, so we did lose a little bit of video footage. Just to give you guys a heads up, if you see either me or David freeze or turn into a cartoon briefly, that's what's going on. Luckily, we did at least get all of the audio, so nothing was lost there. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's another Koffee Talks. David, how is everything going with you?
Dan, you know how much I appreciate you asking that question each and every week. And what a wonderful week, buddy. I got into my cards, and after I finished getting into my cards, I got into my cards a little bit more. And then I wasn't satisfied, so I reviewed my cards one more time, only to finish the week by then getting back into my cards.
Excellent. Sounds good. I had a few decent things going on this week. Me and Laura have actually been working together to try and sort our Sword and Shield stuff out properly. We had most of the sets in binders, but all of the variants from the era were just in stacks all over the room, like 3 years worth of variants. So we spent a couple of days this week pulling everything out, going over the lists, making sure everything's in the right set binder so that we know exactly what we're missing from the era.
You know, they say there's nothing that brings a couple closer together, Dan, than sorting your master variants together. So I
It
really,
is.
congratulations, buddy.
Thanks. Also, a few cool non-Pokemon things that happened this week. Apparently, the Red Cross has finally ended the mad cow disease panic, and I was able to donate blood for the first time. I went along with Laura. She donates blood about as often as she can. I think it's about every 8 weeks you're allowed to do it, because she gets some time off at Nationwide if she donates blood. I've taken her along every time, and I've never been allowed to donate. And then this time, they happened to mention it, and I said, oh, I can't donate because I lived in England. It was, I think, during the late 80s and a lot of the 90s, they said if you lived in the UK or Germany for such a length of time, you can't donate to the Red Cross. And then they said, oh, we actually scrapped that. So I am finally allowed to donate blood in the US.
Dan, let's talk just a little bit more about that. Not necessarily about the donating blood part, but Dan, are you aware of what they call Facebook ratios? Have you ever heard of that before?
I have. I think it's a Twitter thing more than Facebook, but I have heard of it.
Okay, so if you have then, and of course I haven't heard of anything until somebody tells me, at which time I try to forget it. I think it's got something to do with how many people you follow versus how many people follow you. Does that make any sense, Dan?
I think when people talk about ratios, if you say someone gets ratioed, I think that's what the follow versus following thing is what it used to mean. But now,
Okay.
say you post a comment and you get 3 likes, and I post a comment disagreeing with you, and I get 70 likes. It's I've ratioed you because my reply got more likes than your original comment. I
So Dan,
believe what it means now.
yeah, so clearly by that standard, you're always ratioing me, and I'm kind of very small in the ratio chain. But in the old days, the ratios had to do with the fact, oh my goodness, you were such a big person and you didn't follow anybody and they followed you. Well, here's what's happened, Dan. That's what I've been ingrained. I've been basically brainwashed from my children to make sure that my ratios stay the way they're supposed to be. And so you know what that means, Dan? You know what I saw all week in my pictures on Instagram?
What did you say?
I saw you sitting there with your stupid face giving blood because you could give blood with no mad cow disease. Every day when I opened it up, you're sitting in a chair with the bandage on your arm, and I'm thinking, God, I wished I followed more people. Okay, that's it, Dan. I just had to put it out there.
That's it, yeah. I
Yeah.
believe in the old days when ratio meant that, I believe it was Eminem had the ultimate ratio on Twitter as he followed 0 people and had over 1 million followers. I think that was a big claim for him back when people worried about your follower to following ratio.
Eminem, baby. 8 Mile. Good movie. Dan,
I haven't seen it. Well,
oh, you haven't? You haven't seen anything, buddy. I'm going to work on that. We got like a
yeah.
list. At some point, I'm going to start questioning you with the questions, and you're going to have to make sure you watch them just for not looking bad on the video.
Yeah.
Dan, I got to tell you what happened this week to me, other than the cards, the cards, the cards, the cards. I got in my Paldea Evolved and my Crown Zenith set.
Yep.
So I'm very excited to do that because you never know with the Postal Service what's going to actually get here or not. That Paldea Evolved set is 467 cards right now without the variants in there, just a handful. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's a crazy big set. I know you know that. And the Crown Zenith set, which you talked about, the Galarian Gallery. you were right. Amazing cards, really beautiful.
Really
Last week, I know
beautiful.
we talked about that in our subsets podcast. It so happened, I just wanted to point out a couple of quick cards that I noticed in there. It so happened that there were three of them, the way that the set was put together, that were in a row, numbers, Glaring Gallery 35, 36, and 37. And those cards were, I put them as, I wrote some notes like amazingly textured cards. One was Leafy on V Star, and it has this lush
Yeah.
foliage background that's so beautiful, the greenery behind it. And then it had Entei V, which was next to it, that had this really rich looking brown, volcanic kind of tone to it,
Yeah.
sort of like what's happening in the background. And then finally, the Simisear card, the Simisear V Star, which had a whole different color than any of the other cards in the set. It just stood out because its coloring with all the little different Simisears on the page were different. I actually think Simisear had some kind of reference to fireballs, which typically once a week or so, my wife and I'll make a batch of that stuff and just sit up at night and drink. So that was kind of that one does scored home as well as so that
Yeah.
nice sets. I liked them a lot.
Yeah, I talked about this bit last week. That's one of the reasons I prefer Galarian Gallery hugely over the two shiny vaults, is that from one card to the next, you're getting such a variance in the art style, how they look. It doesn't just look, one continuous color across a page. You've got a lot of really bright different colors and a lot of different things standing out. I absolutely love it.
So of course I get the sets. I'm ecstatic as hell. I go through and check them because I cannot tell you there's sets I haven't checked in 22 years. And when I've done that, I realized there's always one card missing or a card that's duplicated. So I better stop doing that, David. You better get into them now and figure it out. So I did that, and I contacted the person who built the set, and I said, "How dare you? How dare you? Do you understand you neglected to give me my Sky Seal Stone reverse hollow? There's a card missing in the set." To which he said, "How dare you ever accuse me of not giving you a full set? You know I know better than that, and you know that you know better than that, and we both know better than that, and you should know better than that." So, Dan, what's up with that? Why is there no Sky Seal Stone? Sky Seal Stone. Just let me see if I can do that 3 times fast. Sky Seal Stone, Sky Seal Stone, Sky Seal Stone. Okay, that's okay. Why is that card not in the set in reverse hollow, Dan? What's up? Why is there a single card missing reverse hollow?
It's something to do with the seal stones. There's one in this set, and there was a couple in Silver Tempest. I think it is because of the layout of the card. It has the picture. I mean, people will see it on screen if they're watching the video version of this. It has the picture where the hollow is, but then the text box is all taken up with this additional adding a V-Star power thing that maybe it just wouldn't look right in reverse. But either way, those seal stones just don't have reverse versions.
And from what you've told me, that's like the only cards, right? I mean, other than this Sky Seal Stone and this Earthen Seal Stone from Silver Tempest. Can I say, Dan? I would like to say this. I know you're going to contradict me. That's the fun of the podcast. Dan, those are the only two cards we know of at this point, possibly, that don't have reverse hollow versions of the hollow or of the regular cards, correct?
The only other one that comes to mind is a Ditto from Pokemon Go, which is the card where you could pull a reverse hollow of either Spinarak, Numel, or Bidoof, and it would have a small Ditto symbol in the bottom. And if you got that, it meant the card was actually a sticker, and you peeled it off, and there was a Ditto card underneath. That Ditto, whenever you peeled it, would only be hollow and never reverse hollow. So that Ditto doesn't have a reverse hollow version, but that's the only thing that comes to mind, other than, sets where basic energies didn't have reverse hollows and stuff like that.
So I think that's so interesting. I don't think I still understand the Pokemon Go piece of this, and we're going to allude real quick if you don't mind. Because I just think it's something that maybe other people don't understand as well. If you wanted a full set of Pokemon Go, what of those cards do you need? Does that mean you need 3 of those cards because you have 3 different stickers, or there's 3 underneath, or do you need 1 sticker card and then 3 cards where the sticker is peeled so you know what's underneath them? How many cards would you need for the master set?
What you'd be looking at would be 1 peeled card, which would be the Ditto, and then 3 different cards with the sticker still on, which would be the Spinarak, the Numel, and the Bidoof.
Oh, it is a total of 4 cards, even if I had it ass backwards.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty predictable for me. All right. So Dan, one more thing about the Rayquaza, not the Rayquaza, the Crown Zenith
Yeah.
set is I noticed, and Dan, I don't know why I noticed anything. Usually things don't strike me. I'm just trying to get through and move on to the next project. But for this particular thing, I noticed that the Rayquaza cards, which were 101 and 102 of 159,
Yeah.
the Rayquaza VMAX cards, they had, although they had different art, they had the same exact writing on each card. So the same attacks and
Yeah.
points, whatever. And that seemed really unusual and something that I sort of looked through other cards, didn't see anything like that. Why would that be? Why would they have the same exact words on both cards exactly?
Well, so there's actually a lot of stuff in Crown Zenith where they have the exact same words as cards in other earlier sets. Sometimes, in fact, they will have the same artwork as cards in earlier sets. I think the Simicia V in the main set, I believe, has exactly the same artwork as its previous printing in another set. But it comes down to what I talked about last week, where we were saying, the end of an era, they look to what have we not translated from Japanese that people might want. And it just so happened there were two alternate arts of that Rayquaza VMAX that we didn't get in English yet. The original printing of it, which again had the same text but a slightly different artwork, was in Evolving Skies. And Evolving Skies had, it had the regular one, had the nice full art alt art one, but it just had one version of kind of the regular VMAX. But in Japan, it had been in multiple products. It had been in a couple of different decks, so there were different artworks. And people like Rayquaza, so they just saw this as the opportunity to, put it in the set and give people a chance to get those different artworks.
Wow. Okay. Really interesting. I didn't, again, I think within the set, you're right. Knowing I don't look from set to set, so I wouldn't know where they were
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
or different. Of course, you'd play the game, you would know because you'd need the attacks and stuff. But
right.
so yeah, great explanation. Thank you. I'll say one last thing. I know we're a little over on the segment. I just want to say, because I mentioned I did cards, and more cards. Dan, if you came to my house right now, you'd be shocked. You'd open my cabinets, and what you would see is you would see every single set in some form of a binder, labeled in
Wow.
some fashion, all in order, all the way through with all of the holes filled. I was able to basically find or make sure I had coming every other card from all of the vintage all the way through until we get to the new sets. So I can start to embark on my next process, which is going back and filling the variants basically from the latest eras on. So it was really an exciting week for me in getting that stuff accomplished.
Oh, that is pretty amazing. As someone who's seen your house before you did that, it is definitely amazing you've done that. Just as
Thanks,
we're
Dan.
getting out of the intro, I want to give one last quick shout out to someone who did something amazing for me this week. A guy called Raffi, you might have heard of him. He's part of the channel Pokénomics. I think we've both, at some point, done something on that channel before. I think we maybe both actually talked with Jake rather than with Raffi, but I've been talking with Raffi a lot lately because Raffi, like me, collects a lot of non-Pokemon games. And I've bought a lot of cards from Raffi before for both Wars and My Little Pony. This week, I'd ordered some My Little Pony cards from Raffi, some pretty rare tournament foils, and as a bonus, he actually sent me a sealed box of Wars in German, which is a very, very rare booster box. He sent along a nice note saying that he was really sorry to hear about when I had the Venusaur stolen from me at NAIC, and he just wanted to send me a very nice gift. He said I can either keep it sealed or I can do a video opening it. The only promise was if I pull and either of the two cards that he still needs from that German set, I have to send them back to him, which I said, I will do a video on it at some point when I've got a bit of time to really look into the set a bit more in German, do a nice video on it. But just a huge shout out to Raffi, like absolutely incredible gift. Really, really great guy.
I like to tell you I know more about Rafi. I mean, in my interaction with him, a super, super nice guy, honestly, just a different kind of kid. And but all I can really remember about Rafi, other than being tremendously nice, is the red hair. Really red hair,
Very
you
red
know?
hair. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So how you live your life with hair that red and you make it through successfully, that's an accomplishment in and of itself. So yeah, really, really good stuff. Congratulations, Dan. Thank you, Rafi. Nice stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and since you mentioned him a few podcasts ago, I saw that your guy Steph Curry is apparently not just great at basketball. Apparently, he can sink a golf ball as well. I did see
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, I mean, when you have hand-eye coordination, which makes you a tremendous athlete, it's
Yeah,
amazing how some of those guys, it does translate over to other sports. He loves golf. So
yeah. All right, well, I think that's definitely enough of the intro / Crown Zenith discussion part. Should we get on to some comments?
Let's do it.
Let's take a look at your comments.
Okay, we have a decent amount of comments this week. First up, we have your average player says King Gary versus Giovanni Persin, alluding to your desire to fight King Gary last week, and you're pointing out that sometimes I say your name as Persian rather than person.
Yeah, I can't get traction on that. Look, guys, figure this out, all right? And by the way, let me say something about the camera angle. I've switched to computers today, and so the dot is at the top instead of the bottom. So here's what I normally look like. And here's what I look like today. And I'm getting a kink in my neck, so we may have to go a little faster than we're doing, Dan, right now. But I want to fight somebody. Okay? Why can't you guys just set it up? I want to create industry hype, hobby hype. I want to go out there. Maybe we can fight for a pre-release Raichu or something. Maybe we can put up a PSA 10 Charizard first edition base versus. I don't care. Let's just. And if it's not Gary, who else do you want it to be? Just tell me. I'm already training. I've already down 6 pounds. Okay, and I'm trying to get some injections in my knees, so I'm ready to go.
All right, we'll finish this podcast, and I'll try and get Eddie Hearn on the phone and see what we can do.
He's old enough. I might actually be able to take him.
No, not fight Eddie Hearn. Do you know who Eddie Hearn is?
Oh, I thought you meant I thought you were thinking. Maybe thinking Tommy Hearn. So sorry.
No, Eddie Hearn is like he runs all of like boxing promotion.
Yes, he used to be a fighter.
Maybe. I don't know. He's quite young. I didn't know if he used to be fighting himself.
Maybe it's Hearns' kid. When I grew up, I was watching Hearns fight, so it's probably all in the family.
Well, Eddie Hearn's dad is Barry Hearn, who runs the snooker.
No, so that's not the same guy.
Maybe it's a UK thing.
Dan, if we really should be deleting that entire segment out, but we're just going to keep it in because it just shows the major idiocy that is the combination of the two of us. Go ahead.
I mean, that's the whole podcast.
Yeah, it is.
All right, next comment comes from Steve Jackson. He says, hope they change the trophy art this year. It would be nice. I think I did talk a couple of podcasts ago. Well, I feel if they were going to change the art on the trophy cards, they would have done it for London as kind of a big relaunch coming back after 2 years off. But Japan would obviously be a great time to change it. If they do change it, maybe they would do some sort of, reference to the old original 97 Japanese Pikachu trophies. I know there's a lot of people out there who would love to see original fat Pikachu on a English language trophy card.
I'm sorry, what did you call Pikachu? Original what?
Fat Pikachu.
I would prefer, excuse me. I would prefer we don't use that term on this podcast, okay? If you'd like to say possibly, a bit overweight, if you'd like to say rotund, possibly, stumpy or something, but let's avoid the F word, okay?
Okay. Perfectly spherical Pikachu, as he was originally drawn.
I can deal with that. That's fine. Good. That's good.
You know what would be weird and would save you a lot of money? What if the trophies are in Japanese this year?
Well, and let me tell you what else would save me a lot of money, Dan. If the trophies don't change the art. Because the less changes there are, the less people that necessarily potentially might want them, the more that I can just go down my small road in my small town doing small town things with my small time collection.
Yeah. I think if they did put the trophies in Japanese this year, the value of the trophies overall would be way higher than they have been. It's just that you personally wouldn't need to worry about them.
Yes, that's a great idea. I never thought about that. And I hope you're right on this one, Dan. I could use a financial break for a 12-month period.
It'd be good. And then maybe, if they did that, maybe then also all of these staff and Top Cut promos are the Japanese version rather than the English version of the card. Maybe
Dare to dream, Dan. Dare to dream. I like it. I know what I'm going to be dreaming about tonight. So, and if I have somebody make a wish on something, I'm going to start going down this path. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll try and save you some money with that happening. Anyway, next comment is from Catchable Collectibles. Says, Dan versus Dave, let's see who reigns supreme on the Coffee Talks pod. Dave versus Gary works too. He also said, I agree with Dave's take too on things, likely not having much rhyme or reason on specific print runs like these items. Overall print numbers, though, for cards more so, I think they do consciously and carefully choose amounts, and they've navigated the last few years well. So basically discussing what we've talked about too many times on here, the NAIC Pokemon Center limited items. And as you said last week, you don't see them having any sort of plan on how they actually print these items. It's not, deliberately limited. It's just, it screws up from one thing to the next, and we never know what's going to happen. But Dan's saying he thinks that with the cards, they've made a bit more of a concerted effort. The print runs of the sets are higher, which ties into what they're trying to do.
And when Dan said, I agree with Dave on this topic, on this situation, that's like a pop one, Dan.
Yeah, someone agrees with you.
Yes, that's pop one.
It's got to happen every now and then.
Not too often, Dan.
Yeah, was it they say it's a stop clock is right twice a day?
Yes, they're right.
All right, next comment we have from Craig. Says, I'm in my binders at least once a week putting in new cards that I've acquired. I'm sure my collection pales in comparison to both of yours, but when you have 16,000 plus cards, it's harder to remember what you do and don't have when it comes to variants. I have to be reminded what time to pick the kids up from school and clubs, so I have no chance of remembering specific cards. Pokélector is decent, but it doesn't really track the variants I have because I only want to complete the basic sets. Any reverses / variants I pick up are a bonus to me. That kind of ties into what I said I was doing this week, was I was actually making lists and trying to figure out what variants I was missing from the Sword and Shield era, because there was some of them we just had no clue on.
Yeah, so of course that's both. Well, that's most collectors' situations. Their lives get in the way of the collections. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to read a couple of other things that Craig sent to me individually, because he was afraid if he sent them to you, Dan, you would not have the courage to put them on the podcast. So
I was gonna mention something. Craig sent something to the Coffee Talks Instagram I was gonna mention as well. But okay, you mention your things first and we'll see if it was the same.
All right, fine. So the one thing that Craig said is, I call him our resident Pokemon character expert. So he likes to give me the trivia. He gave us the trivia on the 151 Mew or Mewtwo last week. It's to some of the Mew and a 2. I don't know what it is. And then this week he said 54 Psyduck is Junichi Masuda's, one of the founding members of Game Freak and current COO of the Pokemon Company, favorite Pokemon. Okay. So that was this week's trivia around the Pokemon characters. And then Craig sent me a video because he was so upset that I would even insinuate that I could articulate that there's the possibility of him not going through his cards. Okay, well, gee, I maybe could find a few more things offensive than that, but that's fine. So he sent me a video of him going through his cards. All right. And the only thing I got from it was that he had a lot of cards. I think he's got like 16,000. He'll tell you that over and over again. You send Craig, you take Craig to a cocktail party. That guy's going to tell you exactly. He's got like 16,287 cards. And the guy's got it down to a number. And then he's got an accent like no other, Dan. He might be from the UK. I don't know, but it sure sounds like I was listening to somebody, one of the Brits again. So, so congratulations, Craig. Thank you for the video. I loved it. It was great to hear you go through it. Just seeing binders where you open one page for a video doesn't really mean I'm positive you're actually going through it once a week, but I like to take you at your word and not contradict you at this point.
Well, so the other thing that Craig sent was he sent to the Coffee Talks Instagram a picture of Kabutops from Arceus. He said it leaves him down to just needing 10 cards from the Platinum era, 5 from Supreme Victors, and 5 from Rumble. Obviously, he said he's just collecting the main sets. I don't think that includes all the reverse holos and doesn't include every variant. But he's only missing 10 cards to have those regular sets from the Platinum era done.
Okay, wow, fantastic. So yeah, let's try to help him where we can at no cost to him or ourselves.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. It does actually also tie into what Laura was doing this week. We were selling and trading in some stuff at a store earlier this week, and I picked up a decent amount of stuff for myself, and Laura got a lot of reverses from the Arceus set, because that's the next set she's been working on completing, and she's down to just missing 2 reverses from that set, so hopefully she's not going to be too far away from finishing that one.
Yeah, fantastic.
And speaking of Laura, she has the next comment. Says, okay, forget correcting Dan, which I'm sure she could have done if she'd wanted to. Let's take a moment to appreciate the insanity that was Belly Bolt or Tummy Nut, which came during your Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B nonsense last week. She says, this is a call to arms. If you see this comment and want the guys to let me make Tummy Nut merch, give it a like. And that comment has 5 likes, and I know she's already started drawing stuff. So somehow, if this podcast makes merchandise, the first piece of merchandise we make is going to be of a made-up Pokemon called Tummy Nut. So I hope you're happy.
Yeah, so what happened is she basically ratioed the heck out of us. She got the likes,
I guess so.
necessary to basically indicate the human interest and the public interest in a character called Tummy Nut. And I'm ecstatic about it. I'm all behind it. You know, if you're looking for some capital, look elsewhere. But if you're looking for some psychological assistance, call me.
Yeah, maybe by next week we'll have some drawings of what Tummy Nut looks like. We unbelievable. We next up have Cyber X Collection says King Gary versus Uncle Dave. I'll pay to see that. And he clarifies, also, I'm not Steve Jackson. Respect and love you all as well. To which the old card shop replied, saying, that sounds like just the type of thing Steve Jackson would say. And Cyber X Collection said, don't listen to this guy. I'm also the old card shop. Remember, we're all the same person.
Oh man, I didn't read the last part of that. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man.
You have started something.
Ah, man, my apologies to anybody who's been offended. I have no interest or no necessary reason to offend anybody, but for some reason I do it very often. My apologies to all of you or one of you, depending on who's watching.
Next up, we have Shadowless Jack. Says, Dan has totally said Persian on more than one occasion. I'm sure I did. Says, also, don't mess with Dave's wife or I'll come for you. You've been warned, chat. Great job segmenting the episode. The voice is a nice touch. I will say I missed the Ferris Bueller section very much. We introduced the section breaks and stuff last episode. Seems people were on board with that, so we'll be continuing that going forward. And yeah, Ferris Bueller stuff is going to be back going forward. I've been told. I wanted to see what it sounded like without it, and I've been thoroughly told that we need it back.
Thank goodness you're listening to somebody, because you certainly don't listen to me, Dan.
I want to just try things out, and then I get told.
Yeah, believe me, I got to shut my mouth on that one. I'm just biting my tongue and move on.
Next comment is from Fighter's Destiny. Said, I didn't even know there were so many English subsets. I've been having fun collecting Japanese subsets over the years, like Nat Awake and Pal City. Oh, I think Double Crisis might be a subset, but it only came out in packs, not booster boxes. So the way we were using the term subset last week was to refer to basically a mini set that existed within a larger set. You know, where you'd open packs for one set and you could occasionally pull a card from a smaller set. So Double Crisis was the, as far as I can think, only English language attempt at a standalone mini set. It was a 32 card set that only came in blister packs where you got boosters, but all the boosters would only have cards from that set. They were just smaller, I think only 5 card boosters. So it wouldn't quite fit into what we were calling a subset last week. I can totally get why you would call that a subset, and the same with the Nat Awakes and Pal Cities. It just didn't quite fit into what we were discussing last week.
Yeah, and wouldn't would Dragon Vault then would be another one of those types of sets like
yes, of course,
Double Crisis, right? That are kind of standalone sets that they don't fall within, because you're right. I wouldn't call that a subset as well. I call them and binder them as their own sets.
Yeah, Dragon Vault would fall into the same thing where it would be a mini set rather than a subset.
Yeah, but it is cool that that he's looking at the that he's actually a collector of those kinds of subsets, because I think it's another way to go for folks that make their own choices and are able to do what they want, and maybe find a smaller way, both card wise and money wise, to have a really neat type of collection.
All right, so next comment comes from Pokey Power Ups. Says the voiceover in between segments is a nice touch. As I said, it seems like a lot of people are on board with that, so I'm glad people like it.
Yeah, Dan, so let's just take a second real quick and explain to people how your recording technology works. And the reason I want to say that is because there's times in the video where you'll lock up a little bit. And so there's a slight delay where I'm trying to figure out whatever you're saying and trying to respond to it, or I can't hear it at all. So first, let me respond to the one piece I know I missed. I wanted to thank Shadowless Jack for having my back, and saying that if you ever criticize me in any way, he's coming after you. And for all of you viewers out there, it's not just Dan. Be careful what you do, because that guy, Jack Meeker, very close to Jack Preacher, or whatever, or Jack Reacher it actually is. In fact, he might be his wife, I think, is a preacher's daughter. So it's Jack Reacher with a preacher's daughter, and it's actually Meeker, but he ain't meek about nothing. Get out of his way. Okay, now I've commented back on that because I didn't get a chance to. And then Dan, when you lock up, can you explain to people how you have two different audio tracks, and so it still kind of keeps rolling, but we're just doing the best we can here?
Oh yeah, anyone who wants to know about the recording technology, we record on a program called Zencaster. So it records my audio track and my video on my end, and it records David's audio and David's video on his end. So even if we don't see each other talking, like if we have a slight technical issue, it still saves everything. And then that's what lets me, mute the wind on David's side while you can still hear me talk, just in case anyone cared about the technical aspects.
Well, the only thing about the technical aspect, the reason I want to bring it up, Dan, is because like right now, your internet is so bad that I'm trying to struggle through to here, but they're not going to see that. They're going to see you look perfect because you always do look perfect, and they're going to see me look like an idiot trying to respond to things I can't see and hear. Okay, good. I got it off my chest. It wasn't my rant today, but I needed to get it off my chest. Move on, Dan.
Yeah, we're not having a great internet day today. Next comment is from the old card shop. Says, I'm out of breath just thinking about a boxing match between Gary and Dave.
You know what? As long as you'll pay to watch it, even if it's a charitable, contribution somewhere, or even not pay and just watch it, it's okay. That's a good reason to be out of breath. Tell me who to fight. I want to fight the younger generation. If you put it out there, the Hearns will negotiate it, and we're going to get out there and do it.
All right. Next, we have Christopher said, glad I found this podcast. I'm pretty new getting back into the hobby, and it's always nice to hear from the great collectors. Very, very glad to hear that you're getting back into the hobby. Always nice to see people either new in the hobby or returning to the hobby, and glad you're enjoying the podcast.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Chris Ondi in the house. Good.
Next, we have Maverick Nathan from Bulbapedia, back once again. Says, I'm convinced that we've been seeing more of these subsets lately because Pokemon knows that advertising a set as having more than 230 cards or more than 240 cards will just be intimidating for people who want to buy the cards, and then will make the product less desirable. See Fusion Strike, which I believe, before you counted the secret cards in Fusion Strike, was still out of 270 something. He says, doing the subsets and also eventually making all of the full arts during the Scarlet Violet series into secrets are just ways to hide the fact that their sets are becoming so incredibly, impossibly massive without having to be honest about it in their marketing. People are now used to thinking that over 190 cards is okay, even if the true number ends up being closer to about 260.
So we're going to talk about this later. If you're watching the podcast, just keep watching the darn podcast, because I have some interesting comments later, and I don't usually have interesting comments. But this whole concept of what we've discussed from the beginning of, Origin, as to what is a set made up of, makes a huge difference here. Because there's a set, just the regular cards, there's the reverse hollows, does it include the subsets, does it include the master card, the master set variants? But these reverse hollows alone make these sets tremendously large, especially when they're already large. But who collects them? And does nobody collect them? And do we go back to the old days when no one collects them at all and no one cared about collecting them, and now you can't find them? We're going to talk about that in our card segment. So I don't disagree. I think that he could be right completely, Nate. And why wouldn't we think he's right? He's the guy writing all the historical literature on Bulbapedia or whatever. But it still doesn't make a lot of sense, because what is a set, and how many cards is it? And if he's saying, well, 240 or 190 or 200, imagine the people that are trying to go after 400 or 500.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just that a lot of people will, at very minimum, if someone says they're going to collect a set, what they mean is at minimum they want just one of every card. They don't want the reverses, they don't want the variants, but they will at least want one of every numbered card just in the regular version. And that is when it looks like, if you look at the actual number on the set, it looks like 190, but it's actually 260, just to finish that one set without reverses, without variants, anything like that.
And why is that, Dan? Why are they so close-minded? Why does everybody? I thought jumbos were the hated card in the hobby. Why are reverse hollows the most hated card in Pokemon? Why is it that when somebody's doing a break or something, apparently you just toss aside the reverse hollows? You just all you care about is EX, GX, VX, VMAX. Put 4 letters together and make something you care about.
So I don't so much think it's people hating the reverses. I think it's just if people are wanting to collect just a set, then it's a lot easier to collect, the non-hollow and regular hollow versions than it is to collect a full reverse set, because depending on the era, you get maybe 1 or 2 reverses per pack. and it's just a lot more difficult, a lot more packs to put those sets together.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, again, we're going to talk a little bit about this later when we get to our highlighted card segment.
Yeah.
But I just wonder in the future if these cards will ever have any value or not. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, and I guess we'll talk about it more in depth.
Yeah. Next comment we have from Derek, not Derek. I've always found the trainer decks really cool, but I'll never understand only having the one rare. Like, what is someone meant to do with all of their Squirtles? This comment, I think, seems to go a little bit more with a video I actually published in between the last podcast, and now we're opening up the new battle decks, which we'll mention a little bit later again in the video, just briefly. But yeah, I don't understand really those train decks having no rares in them at all. If they are supposed to be decks that people are getting into playing with, you're going to need at least a couple of rares.
And this, I didn't realize that if that's what that was about. I thought that maybe because I'd asked folks to go and watch our trainer deck A or B segment, that he could have been talking about trainer decks A and B from the prototype decks. He was not talking about that at all, Dan?
Oh, I guess if he was talking about the trainer decks A or B, then yeah, they do also only have the... Actually, no, they have a couple of rares in, because they have the one variant, what would be foil in either Blastoise or Machamp, which is non-foil, but I think they have, at least one of them I think has a computer search or some rare trainers in them.
Okay, but the Squirtles comment specifically, do you think that they're not in those A or B?
Trainer deck B does have some Squirtles, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
I guess it could have been about either. I guess Derek
Okay.
needs to comment on this episode as well and clarify which he was talking about.
Well, if there's one person that's going to be ambiguous in his commentary, it's going to be Derek, not Derek. IKEK, okay? And also Derek, not Derek. Is Derek the one that broke the rules for the giveaway, Dan?
Oh, putting the number in the comment rather than messaging.
Derek, not Derek. Read the rules, not rules, okay? Because here's what they tell you. You have to DM me, which something means like direct message, or it can mean some other things if you don't have a clue what it means. You have to go to my Instagram at dperson1. You have to DM me with the number. If you put it in that, you're automatically disqualified. I didn't disqualify you. I put you in the drawing. But don't do it again, Derek, not Derek, or you're going to not be able to enter or not enter the next drawing, not drawing.
We got one more comment. It's from Tivu, who says, "Whoa, more Crown Zenith." I think in response to the announcement that there is one more Crown Zenith product coming out in late August.
Tommy, nice job. Thanks for stepping in. All right, I got a couple more comments, Dan.
Okay.
They're both in relation to my discussion last week on Look What I Found, the card, the Reshiram, and my romantic gesture discussion and advice for folks on how to use that card. If you haven't seen that and you have your loved one and you want to maintain that relationship, go find this segment and watch it. Got it? That's what we do these for. We're not doing it for our own profitability. At least I'm not, for sure. Dan, possibly, I'm not sure. So, oh no, I'm not allowed to say his name. I can't say. I already, but you might. Dan, you got to beep that out. So, okay. So I just said the name. Then I'm going to have Dan go back and beep the name out because I'm afraid that his girlfriend or wife might see it. Okay. And I don't want that to happen. But he said he's actually going to use the idea when they have their anniversary coming up soon in August. So we're going to be very excited to hear how that works out. And then one name that I can say on this one is going to be Ruben Felipe Pereira. And he's just a great friend in Spain. And I like to call him my most kind friends and card acquisition assistants. It's a good title. We have it on a business card now. And so he uses it when he's trying to get a job, like a resume builder. But he said that he almost had a little heart attack, quote unquote, when he heard what I was saying to Dan about the Reshiram, because he basically bought that card from his wife or girlfriend. I think it's a girlfriend. You should after 7 years of being together, guys, think about marriage, because at some point one of you is going to put an ultimatum out there and you're going to have issues. But he bought that card from her, and that's how they met, and that's how they fell in love. And now 7 years later, she's what he calls his crush. But remember, if you don't do something about the marriage soon, despite your youthful age, crush could turn into nothing instead of something positive. So 2 great stories. Follow up to the Reshirams. Thank you for watching and commenting. That's good to hear.
All right, yeah, those are 2 very nice stories to hear, and hopefully
sometimes my nonsense actually turns into something. Who knows? So
it does. Unbelievable.
So, who won last week's giveaway?
Okay, so do you want to let everyone know who did win the giveaway this week? You've alluded to it a
Oh, so
couple
this is
times
the
during the
drawing
comments.
winner segment, Dan? This is what we're doing now, the drawing winner segment?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, you know what? If there's not a more appropriate week for someone to win, and by the way, guys, there's not a lot of entrants, just enter, you're likely to win. My bodyguard guy, okay, is the one who the random number generator selected. Shadowless Jack is now in the winners column. And so I will be sending him something. And he might be the only one who I guarantee I'll send something to because he also knows where I live. it's a no-win. I get caught myself in a virtuous circle of hell. So I'm going to send him his card. Shadowless Jack, you're going to get it. Don't worry about it, okay? It might also, sometimes these things take longer than they should. I don't know. All right, and then next week's giveaway, the number is going to be 63. And I selected the number because the number is Abra. And if you know about Abra, then you know about abracadabra. If you know about abracadabra, you know about magic. Hey, want to see me pull a rabbit out of my hat? So you don't want to see that, by the way. But what I want to tell you is when I'm doing magic for a lot of folks that have already won, I'm making their free gift disappear. Okay. If you haven't received it, it's all very magical. So just hang in there. If you do ever receive something from me, climb into my DMs again, show me a picture just so I know it got there. And for you foreign winners, because who knows where the heck you're located, no one will share any information with me. Like Steve Jackson last week, you think I knew that Steve Jackson was in Canada? I'm not going to send a card to Canada. So Steve Jackson, you're a SOL on that one. No, actually, I did send it to you. But I've never sent a card to Canada, Steve, without tracking it. And I wasn't going to pay the outrageously, like $20 to track it or something. But I could if I have to. But I sent it like regular postage, and I did forever international postage. So if you do get that card, let me know. Okay, I'd be nice to know. I know you won't cheat me, Steve. Tommy Vu, on the other hand, that guy, he'll say he never received it when he did. But hopefully you guys get something. Let me know, and thanks for participating. You put the word next week. How do you win? You make a comment on the video, okay? Andy, you didn't do that. Andy, make a comment on the video. Then you put the number 63 into my DMs on Instagram. Derek, not Derek. Do it right, not wrong. And then you guys Instagram me at dperson1, and we're set to go.
Yep, hopefully they got everything from that. If not, they'll find some clarification somewhere.
It's time to play Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B.
All right, into the first of the sections that I hate, but people seem to love. Trainer Deck A or B. If you don't know what it is, it's an either-or game. David's going to ask me some either-or questions. They're going to make no sense, but they might lead to some horrific podcast merch.
Great idea, Dan. By the way, hate is a real strong word, Dan. I prefer both that and the F word you don't use on the podcast, okay? If you guys didn't hear what the F word was, go back and watch the beginning. It's in there. And so Dan dislikes this a little bit, but there's a lot of things Dan dislikes, and the more you get to know him, you'll understand why. So here's what we do. We give an either or. Dan has to pick a selection. He has 10 seconds to explain the rationale behind that decision. Should he not choose to explain, he doesn't have to. Should he go over 10 seconds, say Pokemon Judge will magically appear, and he may be perpetually, infinitely, or possibly just on the spot disqualified, or maybe not as well. Dan, are you ready?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, Dan, dandelions or daffodils?
Daffodils.
You see, when Dan doesn't know an answer, he always picks the first one, but in his mind right there, he knew that I was waiting for him to pick the first one, so he moved to the second one, and I appreciate the forethought in that, Dan. Thank you.
All right.
Dan, delectable or delicious?
Delicious.
Oh, we're on a trend. I like it.
Yeah.
Dan, dancing deliriously or deliriously dancing?
Those definitely mean the same thing. I'll go with the first one.
Okay, because sometimes it could be an exaggerator for where the adjective or adverb is placed, right, Dan?
I guess.
All right, Dan, in here are we talking about adjectives or adverbs, Dan?
No idea.
Okay, they're adverbs, Dan. They're modifying and describing they're not modifying, they're describing a verb, an action word, Dan. Dan, dubious or draconian?
Dubious.
Any idea why?
Nope.
Okay, well, that's good, Dan. Thank you. Dan, dilapidated or disenfranchised?
Disenfranchised.
And is it something you want to tell the viewers, Dan?
No. No,
You
no,
see,
none of this is stuff I want to tell the viewers.
Dan, here's the thing is if you're feeling disenfranchised, you need to reach out and get support, buddy, okay? Because
Yeah.
that really, when you're disenfranchised, you don't have a voice. At least if it's dilapidated, Dan, you can rebuild it. You can put together, you can upgrade a light play collection to a even a near mint one. But you can't when you're disenfranchised, Dan. So
No,
I think you made the wrong choice, but that's not for me to say, even though I
no.
said it. Dan, dumbfounded or dumb waiter?
Dumbfounded, because that's this entire section for me.
So Dan, do you know what a dumb waiter is?
Yeah, they have it in fancy buildings. You put the food in like a hole in the wall, and then you take it up to another floor.
Yeah, I think that's really only a Brit thing, Dan, and I figured you would know that just because in the U.S. we would not do something that silly. We just send someone up with the food, room service. Okay, Dan, 22, 44, or half the combination of both?
44, I guess.
Dan, belly bolt, tummy nut, or gut screw?
Oh, that's even worse than the first one. Let's go tummy nut so that Laura has something to continue drawing.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. If we're going to get the world to stand behind tummy nut, let's put our cards there.
Yeah.
Dan, gut screw or corkscrew?
Corkscrew.
Are you a big drinker, Dan? Do you open up a lot of bottles?
I'm about to be, if this section goes on much longer.
Okay, all right.
But
Dan,
no, I
great.
don't drink.
No, that's fine, Dan. You don't have to explain what's going on. And if you're not drinking after enough of these podcasts, you really aren't living. Dan, great ball or mediocre marble?
Great ball. Because finally something slightly Pokemon related.
No, there's a lot of this is Pokemon related, buddy. You just got to be able to
Okay.
extrapolate that one, sided mine ears.
In 10 seconds, yeah.
Dan, friends in Sinnoh or friends in high places?
Friends in Sinnoh. I think it's a cool looking card.
All right, but Dan, if you get friends in high places, you can buy all the friends in Sinnoh cards you want, buddy. You got to start thinking out of the box for this stuff. You got to open up your natural desire to learn things.
Yeah.
Dan, Oricorio or Oreo cookie?
Oricorio, because Laura is a huge fan of that.
It's a Pokemon
No,
card.
because Laura is a big fan of that card because it's based off a certain type of bird that they had at the zoo where she worked, and she really liked those birds. So there, not just because it's a Pokemon. And also,
Are you saying?
Oreo
Go ahead.
cookies had Pokemon on them for a while as well, so I could have made that Pokemon related if I wanted to.
That's fine. And you know what? If you're thinking bigger, like I keep wanting you to do, is keep looking at the bigger picture. You pick Oreo cookie because you want a sponsorship from them down the road sometime because they recognize that you selected them over Oricorio. All right. And by the way, Laura, congratulations. Great place to work at the zoo, continuing to make the animals feel good and happy in their environment. It's a very a self-sacrificing position.
She doesn't work there
Dan
anymore. She worked there
Ferrara,
years ago.
what?
She doesn't work there anymore. That was years ago.
I know. But does it mean because she doesn't do something anymore, we just forget about it? It's not a part of her living?
Okay.
I want to at least acknowledge. I mean, come on,
Okay.
Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, Zerora VMAX or Zerora V Star?
The V Star, I think, looks a lot nicer. And I think it's Zera Aura, I think is how you're supposed to pronounce that one.
All right, Dan, Zera Aura. Did I do it okay, Dan?
I think so.
Thanks, Dan. That's good. And Laura, if he's incorrect, would you correct him, please? Because I can't do this much longer.
Yeah.
Dan, cross training or cross worshiping?
Cross training? I'm a very non-religious person, so.
Yeah, I knew you were going to stray away from the religious. I know the two things you'll never talk about are religion and politics. And from our last podcast, we know you'll also not discuss intimacy.
Yeah.
Dan, oh, wait, speaking of which, boy, that was a good segue. Dan, lust or love?
Love.
Dan, lust or luck?
Luck.
Dan, love or luck?
Luck.
Hopefully you're lucky in love, Dan. I don't know, but I mean, I think with Laura, you really are.
Yeah.
So, Dan, this is an important one. I think everybody wants to know, boxers or briefs?
Jesus Christ. Boxers.
He's not going to be able to help you on this one, okay? We don't do religion anyways here.
No, we don't.
Dan, Skella Ridge or skeletons chanting dirges?
Skella Ridge? I think it's Skella Dirge is the Pokemon. I don't know, which I passed caring at this point. Skeller Ridge, whatever that is.
Okay, I screwed it up. You're absolutely right, because that would make more sense. It's Skeledirge is what I meant to say.
There we go.
So
Skeller Dirge.
Skeledirge or skeletons chanting dirges. That would make a lot more sense with the way I
Yep.
put it.
Yep. Skeller Dirge.
Okay, Dan, a couple more. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're starting to feel a pain.
Oh,
Dan,
good.
Quackquaval or Duck Duck Goose?
Quaquavel.
Oh, look how you change the pronunciation just to try to show me up. You're really something else, Dan. And Dan, I think you'll be happy to know this is the last one. Dan, a wonderful secret or a secret wonder?
Secret Wonders, because it's going into our highlighted. Yeah, that's the end of that.
Okay, thank goodness, Dan.
Should we get into our main section for the week?
I think we should. No better time than now.
And now for our highlighted cards of the week.
All right, so if you managed to gather anything from that last question, our highlighted cards of this week, we're looking at the Secret Wonders set, the third set of the Diamond and Pearl era. Dave, why don't you introduce the set a little bit and then we'll talk about it.
Well, Dan, I'd love to introduce the set, but as you know, I don't know anything about these sets whatsoever. Okay. But here's what I know about it in my brief history with the hobby, of course, being more than 20 years. I know that you can't find the boxes anymore. I know that when I was buying booster boxes a while back, and that was a while back, 3-4 years ago, it was one of the hardest ones to find and started to get me to think about this thing might just not have been that produced as much as others. And even today, and I think you were mentioning, before that some of these other Diamond and Pearl era stuff, they're still relatively rare compared to other, eras of Pokemon. That this particular box and set seems to be even more limited. And I know that I looked, I think yesterday, and there was one box and one box only out there on eBay for something like $20,000 now, which is outrageous for these boxes that used to be 5,000-6,000, something like that. So I really know about how limited it is. And I want to talk about, after you discuss the set a little bit, I want to talk about the reverse hollows, set completion, and that kind of stuff, just from the standpoint of, what are collectors not only going to do today, or what do they want to do? What are they going to want to do 10 years from now when it comes to these kinds of sets?
Yeah. Well, so like you said, the whole Diamond and Pearl era is pretty limited on what you can find for sealed product. There's no set from that time period where you can just easily go out and buy a ton of boxes relatively cheaply. They're all very expensive boxes. And there's been a lot of interest in the Diamond and Pearl era fairly recently. I think it's just as we're going through, everyone's always been interested in WotC, and then we saw a rise where people were interested in the EX era for the gold stars, stuff like that. And we've started to see more and more people getting interested in things like the level X's from Diamond and Pearl era. So interest in the era is still going up. This set is a bit of a weird one. It's one of the biggest sets, but it actually has the smallest number of those level X chase cards. There's only 2 level X's in the set, but I think it's only the second, maybe third biggest set of the era, and other sets had anywhere from 3 to 6 level X's, and then as you went into the Platinum era, anywhere up to 9. It is a 132 card set. Like I said, with just those 2 level X's at the end. There were 20 regular foils as well, which was a pretty large number for a set at that time. Couple of just random interesting things with it. One, it was the first introduction of the Kanto starter trio, so Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, within the Diamond and Pearl era, because the first 2 sets had focused mainly on the new Diamond and Pearl Pokemon, and then some others from Generation 2 and 3 mainly. This was quite a big Kanto heavy set. And also, when you were talking about the reverse hollows, so obviously there's 130 possible reverse hollows, but 8 of them, for some reason, you could not get in booster packs. They saved 8 reverse hollows and put them in blister packs. Hey, it is editing Dan here again. I realized I said the wrong number for those blisters. It was 9 cards held back rather than 8, and they were Breloom, Flaffy, Quagsire, Bulbasaur, Carvana, Charmander, Shellos East Sea, Shellos West Sea, and Squirtle. Where normally you would expect to see, like an alternate foil type, like now you would see a Cosmos foil, maybe then you would see a Cracked Ice foil, something like that. They actually just put reverse holo cards as blister pack promos and made them unavailable within the booster packs, which is a very weird one for a set to do. I think it's the only set that's ever done that.
So Dan, we talked earlier about this. At least we did. We sort of alluded earlier to this reverse hollow situation, and if you remember, in the last couple of weeks, I've discussed as I finally was trying to go through all my cards that I couldn't find one set of reverse hollows, and that's been remedied now. And all of my old sets, of course, have all the reverse hollows. But but I, in looking for those and going on eBay and wherever and looking for those sets, they're just not existent. And you can find a handful of cards, and usually you'll find them in light play condition at very best. Finding a whole set is again sort of impossible. And you sort of talked about a minute ago, well, okay, now Diamond and Pearl era is gaining some ground. It seems like the further we move away from these eras, they do gain some ground because people are either kind of filling in their collections or new collectors are coming in. Could be affordability as well. But let's say I wanted to try to talk to somebody who might ultimately harbor the notion of completing some of these master sets or complete sets going forward. Wouldn't it be good to be looking for these cards now? Wouldn't it be good? I mean, you mentioned earlier in the podcast about Laura found a bunch for Arceus this weekend at some store, but I don't think that's going to be the case very often if these things are kind of out of favor for them to all of a sudden fall back into favor and for them to become widely available. Shouldn't they sort of be looking for these cards and possibly considering the investment potential, or even not the investment potential, just having them a part of their set, just because few and far between in decent condition, they're probably going to disappear more and more?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a set that someone's wanting to put together, or if it's an era that someone's wanting to complete, most of the reverse hollows, when you do find them, they're not that expensive. Even in near mint condition, most of the reverses, when you find them, you're probably not paying more than a couple of dollars for them. It's just the problem is actually finding them. The only ones where you're going to be paying a lot more are some of the bigger, more popular characters, like the Charizard, the Mew, something like that. But if you're wanting to put together Diamond and Pearl reverse hollow era sets, it's always a good idea to know exactly what you need. And then, when you're browsing eBay or whenever you are at any of these local stores, just see what they have. And even if you only pick up a couple at a time, it's always worth getting to just slowly build those sets up where you can.
Yeah, and I think the prices vary widely. Of course, condition orientation for collectors varies widely. So there's folks that will never take anything less than a near mint, and some folks that don't care. They just want to fill a hole in the binder. But my notion, I mean, I've on the website, my website sold Deoxys reverse hollows. They sell very, very well, 15, 20, $25 for near mint type of hollows. So,
Yeah.
I think you're lucky if you can find them for those lower prices. But I would encourage those who actually even think about completing that it's going to get harder to put searches on eBay, save searches, and look for lots of them and LOTS that come out, that where there's 20 sold for a certain price, and see if you can negotiate, because the cards are phenomenal. When I was looking through Secret Wonders, I could argue that the reverse hollow cards in and of themselves, because of the consistent sheen of all of them all the way through, are really gorgeous. And they might even be better looking than a lot of the regular hollows and of course the regular cards in the set. So
Yeah, I think we've talked about the Diamond and Pearl era reverses as well in previous podcasts, where the fact that they all have that mirror sheen on them is a big factor in not being able to find them completely near mint to mint, because that type of a reverse does scratch very, very easily compared to some of the other ones, or at least it's way more noticeable on that very flat reverse than it is on, say, the crosshatch reverse or anything like that.
And do you think that the differential in the price of this particular set versus the other earlier ones in the Diamond Pearl era, or even maybe some of the later ones, has to do with the fact that it's got the Charizard, in both the regular and the reverse hollow cards?
I think that's always going to be a factor. Plus, just the size of the set, the fact that it's, just the fact that it's 10, 20 cards bigger than the other sets around it. If you're going for a reverse hollow set, that's an extra 10, 20 packs. That's nearly another full box to get the minimum amount that you would need to finish the set. So stuff like that is always going to play into it. Both the Pokemon in it and the size of the set is always going to be somewhat of a factor.
Okay, all right.
I would say
And
as
then of
well,
course, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This set has in it God of War as a foil, and that God of War was a very, very playable card when it was in standard. And because of how they changed the rotation, that God of War was in standard, I believe, for a full 3 years, which is longer than cards are in standard now, without ever getting a reprint. So I believe that for the full 3 years, if you wanted to play a God of War deck, which you did because it was a top tier deck for basically the whole time, it was the Secret Wonders God of War you had to get. So there was potentially a lot more of it opened compared to other sets because people were wanting these God of Wars.
Wow. And you could have, when you talk about a card for a deck, sometimes that implies even more than one, right? You might have had up to four of them in the deck, depending on
Yeah,
how the
if
deck is structured.
for this card especially, you would want the four God of Wars. You would be wanting the full four.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Interesting. All right, Dan. So the other thing that we talk a lot about is that difference between a complete set versus a master set. I think you and I talk about a complete set as having both the hollows and the reverse hollows. Some people don't and just want one of every card that has got the same art. And then, of course, there's tier three, which I'm on because I like to consider it a higher tier. Most people call it tier one. I am very self-deprecating, so all my tier ones are tiers threes. It caused me to a lot of tears come out, Dan, when I'm talking about my tiers. But the variants, there's like what 17 variants in this set.
Yeah.
So tell our viewers, Dan, tell our viewers how many different kinds of things these variant cards come from.
Okay, so first most obvious one is theme decks. At the time, up until even just a couple of years ago, every set would get 2 or 3 theme decks that came out alongside the set, and they would normally have either some non-hollows of cards that were hollows or hollows of cards that were non-hollow. So this set has 4 variants that come in theme decks. There's non-hollows of Ampharos and Venusaur, and there's Cosmos hollows of Electivire and Magmortar. The 2 of them come in one deck and 2 of them come in the other. Is the first place you get stuff from. Next, we would also have the countdown calendar, which some people may know as it was the original Advent calendar. We've talked about it a little bit before, where it was 24 snowflake stamped promos. And interestingly enough, since we're mentioning it, that Advent calendar actually came with a pack of Secret Wonders in it. Day 24, you got your final promo and a pack of Secret Wonders. So there's a couple of those from the set. I think just 2 out of the 24 come from the Secret Wonders set. There's then 1 card from the Professor Program, a Professor Oak's Visit, 1 card from Pokemon Leagues, which is Roseanne's research. Just your crosshatch foiling on that one. You just get it by attending Pokemon League. And then we have your pre-release promo, which is curlier for this one. You play in a pre-release, and you'd get your participation promo. And then there's a staff variant if you staff the pre-release. And then we come to what I think are the most interesting ones. We have the Shellos. There's 2 different Shelloses in the set. There's West Sea and East Sea. Each of them had a promo for different events. One of them was for Origins in 2008, and one was for Comic-Con in 2008. So they actually get printed with the logo of that event on the card. You would have to go along. I don't think it was just everyone who went. I believe there would have been specific booths or a specific event at Origins or a Comic-Con you had to actually go and play in or sign up for, and you would get one of these cards. And then these again do have staff versions, and the staff Comic-Con Shellos, if you're trying to put together this full master set, that is the one that is the card that's going to trip you up, is the staff Comic-Con Shello. So you're going to have a rough time finding that one. That one does not show up very often. The Origins staff one doesn't show up very frequently, but it definitely shows up a lot more than the Comic-Con one. Final 3 variants are cracked ice versions of Entei, Raikou, Suicune. They came out in tins. You would get a shiny version of the card as a Black Star promo, and then you'd get a cracked ice variant. These came out in 2010, in fall of 2010, so a full 3 years after the set came out. The actual Black Star promos were Heart Gold, Soul Silver Black Star promos, so past the end of Diamond and Pearl era, past all the Platinum stuff. into towards the end of Hot Gold till Silver era. So there was a huge gap between this set releasing and those final variants coming out. But that's a rundown of all the different variants that you would have to pick up for a full master set.
That's one of the things that worries me these days, Dan, because these last couple of eras, Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield or whatever, are the ones I really need to go back and focus on the variants for. I have them up, and so I'm always going back through the binders now to find out where they've added things 2 and 3 years later, because there might still be adding variants that I'm going to need. So this is an issue. So Dan, if you're talking to people, I mean, obviously we talk about you being the proverbial collector, being needing to figure out what resonates for you when you're out there selecting a set, to collect or cards or whatever. But does it make any sense for people to look back at this stuff? Like, is it gonna potentially disappear over time, and for this Diamond and Pearl era that might be just kind of growing in interest now, for folks to look back and consider? But I have no biased interest, Dan. What are you trying to sell us, some Diamond and Pearl era stuff, Dave? No, I'm not trying to sell nothing. Okay. And who are you talking to? Are you talking to Dan, the podcast viewers? Okay, just stop. So what I'm saying is, does anybody care? Should anybody care? Do we just forget about this because you can't own it or you can own it? Or, what do we do, Dan? What do we do about Diamond and Pearl's Secret Wonder set for those who are watching? Do they have any interest to try and collect a box, a set, reverse hollows, anything? Does it even matter, Dan?
Nothing matters in this, David. Nothing we do or ever talk about on this podcast will ever truly matter. But
boy,
I think
there is the sad reality of both of our lives. What
It
somebody
is,
said, we could be the ones that go in the squared circle and fight. You know what? That'd be, between us, we only have like one lung. So I mean, I don't know what that would look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I know there'd be a lot of biting and that kind of stuff. So, and fingernails. Okay, so go ahead. What do you want to say something about Secret Wonders, Dan? Give us a good conclusory type of comment.
Well, I do think they're nice sets, the Diamond and Pearl era sets. I know that personally, I'm doing some stuff where I'm buying Diamond and Pearl era stuff at the moment, just here and there. I've been focusing more on the variants and the promos, and I'll be aiming to finish off all of the variants for all of the sets before I then dive back in and look at the actual sets themselves. I always just prefer doing it that way, I think, because, the variants have interesting stories and stuff, whereas just opening stuff with booster packs, it might be rarer, it might be more valuable, but you don't get that story with it. This one, I think, because of the fact that it has, it had the super playable God of War, it has the introduction of the Charizard to the Diamond and Pearl era, people are going to like it. I will also say, if you are a fan of nice-looking mint cards, this one is a difficult one to do, because we talked about, the reverse hollow scratching. One thing worth mentioning is hollow bleed. Now, I'm sure you've seen this term, everyone's seen this term thrown around a ton in, misprint groups, other Facebook groups. So, the way they print Pokemon cards, you have your card stock, it has that black layer through the middle to separate the front and back. People know about that because that's how you look for fakes. They then have the layer of foil printed on, and then they print the ink of the cards on top of the foil for your regular foils within a set, and they put more ink on where they don't want any foil showing through, lower levels of ink where they want the foil showing through. It's just how they do the effect. Hollow bleed is where they don't put enough ink on to the areas that it's supposed to cover up the foil. So, like through the text of a card, you're not supposed to see the foil through there. Secret Wonders was really, really bad for hollow bleed. I mean, the whole Diamond and Pearl era was not great for it. You saw quite a lot of it. But Secret Wonders especially was a set where it is so much harder to find these cards without hollow bleed than it is to find them with hollow bleed. Like, to some degree, if you want a very nice mint looking set without hollow bleed, then those 20 hollows that you need to get are going to be a difficult one for you, just because of how prominent it was throughout the whole set. Quick thing to say value wise, I have looked up roughly what mint condition stuff is, or near mint condition stuff is going for at the moment, compared to sealed pack prices. Obviously, people know at this point you shouldn't be just cracking sealed packs if you're trying to build a set. It's not the best way to do it. But for the price that just one loose pack is going for, the only way you make any money on the pack value-wise is if you pull Charizard, either in regular or reverse. And even then, it's not that much more than a pack. Even if you pull the second most expensive card in the set is the foil Mew, you can open a pack which has the foil Mew and the reverse foil Mew, and those two cards together are still worth less than the pack you just opened. So that's just something to say about the values in this and how you should be looking at it. But it's up to certain people. I can see why people try not to focus on these sets too much and will instead just focus on trying to get all the level X's of the era or whatever. But I would agree with what you said, David, where if they're wanting eventually to pick up the Diamond and Pearl sets in full with all those reverses and everything like that, it's definitely something they should be keeping their eye out on. Especially because, like I said, people are getting interested in those level X's and stuff. There is the potential of people doing box breaks, which will mean the not so good stuff may come to market if they sell it off because they're trying to hit those bigger cards.
So when you talk about hollow bleed, Dan, you know how I cannot stand miscuts, misprints, crimp cuts, hollow bleeds. I'm just kidding. I could care less about them. But for my little diatribe right now, I have to say I can't stand it. So Dan, because I can't stand it, I either have two choices to make. I guess not two choices, a choice between two options to make at this point.
Yeah.
Sounds like either I'm going to open my binder and see if I've got hollow bleed cards, and then be disappointed in my set and throw it out, or I am not going to open my binder at all, hope I don't have hollow bleed cards, and just hang on to it forever and basically let my elderly mind just forget even what a hollow bleed is. Dan, which one should I select?
Open the binder. You're never going to rest until you've opened the binder. You're not.
So I'll have to actually look and see if there's hollow bleeds in there.
Probably. I just know you. You're not gonna rest. You're not gonna sleep easy. You'll be waking up at night, tossing and turning, and you won't know why. And it'll be because you're wondering if you have hollow bleed cards.
Yeah, and it's not just on 25 hollow bleed cards, because I couldn't even tell you if I do, because you could describe it and define it for about 27 layers, and this thing comes in, you put a print layer on this, and the hollow's got this. It doesn't make a difference. I'm gonna look at it, it looks all the same to me, okay? I mean, I didn't have my macular degeneration surgery yet, so maybe it'll come through and it'll help me out. Dan, also when you mentioned this whole, hollow bleeds and definitions and stuff, that made me think of something I forgot to say earlier. I forgot to say it earlier. Dan, I'm pepped up right now because we've been on this podcast so long because of your internet difficulties. People don't know that we actually started at 10 this morning and it's 6 at night. And I'm still sitting for Dan to reset the video for the 27th time. Thanks, Dan. I got nothing better in my life to do, okay? I'm not hungry or anything. And I'm not getting, nobody's door dashing to my home on Dan's bill. So basically, I wanted to say that we were talking about reverse hollows and the existence of no reverse hollows for those earth and sky seal and whatever sky stone stuff earlier. Yeah. If you guys go out to eBay and you would like to buy the reverse hollow of the card that seal stone, the reverse hollow, a card that doesn't exist, there are no less than 50 listings on eBay for both of those. So if you'd like to buy a card that doesn't exist, just go to eBay, buy a reverse hollow earth and or sky seal stone, and it shows you how much information is out there that's completely buffoonery, okay? It's a complete and utter joke by people that don't know anything, so don't get sucked into that stuff. Dan, you said something else. I'm just random thinking now. You talked about box breaks. You talked about some of the extras of these box breaks, the Secret Wonders box break maybe coming to market. I encourage you guys, if you're watching box breaks and you're looking to complete that set, reach out to the person holding it before they even get it to the market and say, hey, I'm trying to put together a collection. Would you potentially agree to sell me those cards or whatever, and see what they may or may not do and try to get ahead of the others in that situation too. So a lot of talk about nothing, Dan, but I needed to get it out because I was starting to boil over with my need to speak.
Yeah. Well, that's Secret Wonders in a nutshell. I mean, I'm sure there'll be more questions and comments on it that people will leave, which we can touch on next week if people have more questions about it.
So I'm going to finish this last thing about, I'm going to say this. I love the hollows, guys. I don't understand why nobody likes the reverse hollows. Don't understand why they don't collect them more. I don't understand why people are going after them more now when it's going to be more expensive later. And then there's one more thing. So I said to Dan this week, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe you should be looking for, I said, is your Secret Hollows, is your Secret Wonder set? I talk a lot to Dan. I say too much sometimes. He won't ever answer me. I said, Dan, is your Secret Wonder set complete? He goes, no, David, it's not. Well, I was taken aback. And I said, Dan, maybe you should be out looking for some of this stuff. And that guy bit my head off. I got to get you in the cage, buddy. I'm tired of it. He said, What do you mean? It's not what I'm focused on right now. It's not like they're not available. It's not what I'm focused on. Well, apparently the only thing Dan is focused on is, podcast analytics. I don't even know at this point. But it makes no sense because why? What is he focused on? Well, he's focused on the variants because they have good stories. You know what? Give me a good story in a quarter, Dan, and I'll show you a prison cell that will give you a bed with a roommate.
Is
So
this
I
your
don't even
rant or
know.
not?
No, it's
I have
not
to
the
check.
rant.
Okay.
Okay, it's just that I just like the set and I like the reverse hollows and nobody and you won't and you're like you won't step up. I got to hear about Laura's always completing her collection. She went out this weekend and now she's only two away from Arceus, and you don't care. You want an incomplete collection with a bunch of stories around it. Dan, just forget it. Can we just move on?
All right, are you ready to do your rant now?
I guess I got myself angry enough to do it, sure.
Oh, good. David has a rant coming on.
All right, well, it's that time where I get to take a break and play on my phone for 3 minutes while David does a completely incomprehensible rant, so take it away.
So you can't find any other time to play on your phone? Is that what you're saying? Like, it isn't even important enough to consider the things I'm going to say? You're not going to even potentially have a response. You're just going to get on that darn phone again, Dan? Is that what you're saying?
The first time you did a rant, I tried to have a response and you told me off and said I shouldn't be responding because it's nonsense, so I'm just going to play on my phone, yeah.
You can respond to nonsense. What do you do the whole podcast, buddy? You're not thinking through the logic. You're inconsistent in your logic. Plus, you got me so angry with this whole thing about Laura getting her collection filled, and you just want stories that I think you should be listening to the rant. Does that make any sense?
I have to listen to the rant 3 times in editing, so.
All right, just forget it, Dan. I don't care about you anymore, and I'm tired of it. But I do care about the rest of you. I'm going to tell you what's bothering me this week, okay? Here's what's bothering me this week. It's the looks I get from you guys, those looks of disgust, those backhanded comments that you send me in the DMs, possibly that you don't even send me. You might put it out to a friend and expect me to see it. Those social posts. And you know what they're doing? They're all targeting me because I'm old. Oh, David, you're too old to still be collecting Pokemon cards. Why? Why am I too old? Do I look old? Is that what it is? I know I look old. I look in the mirror every day, guys. I didn't even look in the mirror in my 20s because I was so disgusted with my appearance. But that's okay. I've got a little bit more acclimated to it because after this many years, you watch a zombie movie, you watch me, same damn thing. But what's too old for anything? Okay. What is it? A mental thing? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it a physical thing? Who are you going to tell me? Does my doctor tell me what's too old? Why do you guys get to tell me? Okay. The only one that's got my back is Shadowless Jack. The rest of you guys are all over me. Derek, not Derek, thinks I'm too old to be not even that old. Okay. And what is it? A societal label? You guys are going to think I'm a peaking? You're too old. You're just too old to do these things. No, I'm not too old to do a damn thing. Okay. If I can climb in a cage and I can fight with Dan, and between the two of us, we have a single lung, we can beat the heck out of other people. I'm not too old to collect Pokemon cards, but you think I am because I'm not cute and I'm not innocent. And I've lived my life, right? Well, that doesn't matter. You don't have to be cute and innocent to collect Pokemon cards. Bad people do bad things. In fact, good people do good things, and some bad people even do good things. Good people don't do bad things. I don't think anyways. What did you guys do to make your decisions on what's too old to collect Pokemon cards with all your aptitudes, okay? You read an article in the New York Times and the Atlantic, okay? You subscribe for $1.99 a week to the Atlantic so they can tell you what you should agree or not agree to. It's just ridiculous. Were you guys raised by parents that were limiters, or were you guys raised by parents that were enablers in a good way? They lifted you up and they told you dreams are still possible, right? Why can't I answer this question for myself? I am tired of being judged. You don't judge me. You don't walk a mile in my shoes without being able to judge me for the mile you walked in my shoes. You don't make a dissertation up in a paper unless you know something about it. You could research it personally. You could put in some site sections on the internet or whatever, but I don't care, okay? And suppose I'm really old, right? I've got a caretaker in here with me right next to me right now. Here's what I want to know. Should she be changing my diapers or changing my card sleeves? Should she be wiping the food off my mouth or wiping the dust off my cards? Okay, I don't know. That's what I want to tell you, right? Should she be turning the TV on for me, or should she be sitting there and going, hey, let me grab your Pokemon cards because we've still got some work to do? You're not going to tell me what's right for me. You're not going to tell me I'm too old. I'm as much a youngster as all of you. It's all a mental thing. It's all a spiritual thing. It's all a physical thing. And I'm young in every way until the day they knock me into the ground. And let me tell you one last thing, okay? And this is the sad part of my rant, but I'm going to put it out there for all of you because you guys are more like my family. My family disowned me years ago because they thought I was too old to keep collecting Pokemon cards. And maybe that's why this resonates with me, and maybe this is why this hurts. But December 4th of this past year, my dad passed away, okay? That's the truth. And when they buried him in the ground, one of the religious things they did was they threw books they threw books and paperwork into the 6-foot hole that they put him into as a way of religiously honoring him. Well, you can take all that religious stuff from me, guys, and you can throw it the hell away. I don't want it. I want you to take all your bulk commons, and when you lower me in that ground, I want all that bulk dropped into the ground with me, because I'm not going to be too old to collect Pokemon cards all the way until I'm too old to take my last breath. And that's what I got to say about that.
Right, well, that got way too real. How do we move on from that?
Well, yeah, we just move on. It doesn't matter, okay? It's just important for people to know where I stand on things. That's all.
All right, cool. We move on. Let's get ready for the look at what cards we found this week.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, onto the section we're calling Look What I Found, where we're just going to both highlight a card from our collection this week. And I've slightly cheated because I've stolen a card from Laura's collection this week.
What?
I know. It's one that I'm still looking for, and I'm hoping to get very soon. But this
wait, Dan, you're not gonna tell her though, right?
I mean, I think she'll find out when she watches this podcast.
Okay, sorry, Dan. Right
I haven't stolen it permanently. I've stolen it just to show off. This is one of the Sword and Shield era variants. Like I said, we were sorting those this week. This is one of the few that only one of us owns. Most of them, either we both have them or neither of us have them. It's just one or two where we've only managed to get one copy so far. And this is one of them. You'll see a better picture on screen, but this is a Cosmos foil Pikachu with a Play Pokemon symbol. So this is not from those Play Pokemon prize packs. This was actually from the Play Lab at Pokemon Worlds. There were 6 different promos you could get by going through the Play Lab at Pokemon Worlds. Laura managed to get 2 of each, except for this Pikachu. She was only able to get 1. We're hoping that they start coming to more Play Labs in future so that I have another opportunity to get them. But for now, we've only been able to get this one. And I know I've had people hounding me to try and buy this card. After I got back from Worlds last year, we put up a video on the 6 of them. And I even had someone who's messaged me saying they would sign a contract stating that they would never, ever sell this card if I would sell it to them, proving that they just wanted it for their collection. But unfortunately, as I said, this one's Laura's, and I'm still looking out for mine. We've been to a few Play Labs since, and they haven't come back. But I'm hoping either they come back to more Play Labs or we start getting them at Pokemon Leagues, because that was the intention for them, was that they would be at Pokemon Leagues. But very cool card, I think, nonetheless.
So, Dan, that's what you want to do, buddy. You want to have a podcast with me and expect me to be a willing participant and then depressed the blank out of me with this kind of showing of a card. Makes no sense, buddy. I really think you got to start thinking about what you're doing. You have what, maybe 20,000 cards to choose from, and you're going to pick one I don't have. Dan,
you don't have this one?
How could I have it? The only way I could have it is if you got it for me. And if you guys got it for me, and one time you guys were kind enough to help me get a set of cards like that a long while ago. But I certainly feel like, based on how new those seem to be, I wouldn't have those at all, right? Why would I have those, Dan?
They're from a year ago, so I don't remember if you got them from someone. But if not, when they come to Leagues, I'll be grabbing you a set too.
Please, because I think that there was a situation where there was some cards, and you guys helped me get a set of cards like that. But I wouldn't think if you don't have it, I wouldn't have it. So yeah, Dan, I'm pretty much sad. Now, I don't even think I guess it's a good lead in, Dan. I guess a sad lead in is to what I'm going to tell you about my card I found. Eeyore just entered the broadcast.
Yeah.
So this week when I was looking through my cards, I was looking through Chilling Rain, and I found a really neat card. All right. And it's, this was supposed to be so much more upbeat. And then you gave me this.
Yeah.
I can't even deal with it. I need another drink in here, please. Double the liquor. Okay, so here's what happened. My card is the Urn of Vitality, number 229 of 198, the Urn of Vitality. Here's what happened. It's not a good story, but it is what it is. About a year ago, my aunt on my mother's side, twice removed, she passed away. And in her will, she granted me sole access. I might have to sole access, but she granted me access to the ashes of her when she was cremated. So since that time, I've been holding on to these ashes in this urn. And when I saw Urn of Vitality, it reminded me of the urn. And so what I did when I saw this card is I pulled the ashes out of storage and I set them on my bed side, next to my bed on my nightstand. And so every morning now when I wake up, I see this urn of what I call the Urn of Vitality. I've renamed it now. And I thank myself for being alive. I don't think. I thank I thank my life. I thank whatever you thank. I'm just happy to be alive. I give thanks. That's what I want to say. And I give myself a pep talk for being vibrant and successful and whatever for the remainder of the day. And I don't know what my aunt thinks when she's watching me do that from wherever she's watching me, but I like to hope that she's at least happy and feels like she's still useful because of the my continued knowing about her urn and my urn of vitality. And that's my story, Dan.
All right. I'm glad we've learned that you think stories about multiple members of your family passing away aren't depressing, but the idea that you might not own a Pokemon card is very depressing to you.
It is, Dan, because it's no matter. The more we tell stories, no, what you're doing is you're mischaracterizing, buddy, and I don't appreciate it one bit. And no, I can't have no more time for rants today. But this is the deal right now, okay? Number one, get your technology fixed. Number two, stop judging. Number three, you keep memories alive with stories, good, bad, or indifferent, okay? It doesn't matter. You know, if I could tell you how many times when I told you I was raised in an orphanage and stuff, if I could tell you how many times I got the belt, those are good stories, Dan, because I got the belt and I can remember getting the belt, all right? So just understand, my stories may not be happy stories, but they're real stories, Dan. Your stories, you know what your stories are about, Dan? Your stories about, oh, I want to collect these cards because they have a good story behind them. Is your good story because it's Pokemon related? No. Yes, I am depressed. I need my Pokemon cards. They stabilize my moods when kind of drugs can't do such a good job of doing that.
Yeah, I just have the drugs to stabilize my mood.
Fair enough. Somewhere. That's good. That's a good choice. It's just a choice, Dan.
Somehow that was our highlighted card from our collection section.
Okay.
Any Pokemon in the news lately?
Okay, for TCG in the news, just a couple of quick things to mention. So they've given out some more details of the My First Battle deck, which is a set coming later on this year, aimed at getting new players into the TCG. It's kind of like the Battle Academies we've had before, but it seems even more basic than that, a much, much more starter product. And it seems they're going to have, different backs to regular Pokemon cards. So that would indicate to me that they're going to be cards and effects that you wouldn't normally see in regular Pokemon. They're going to be set up specially in a way to support newer players getting into it and helping to teach people how to play, so they don't actually want them going into regular tournaments.
And I think one thing that's interesting, Dan, I looked at a few of the comments around that, and it seems like people are wondering what's the basic, idea behind it, right? Like if you've had success with Battle Academy decks Battle Academy board games and stuff, and people are thinking those are good fulfillment of this trying to indoctrinate folks to the game. What is the real reason behind this? Is it meant to be for younger players? Is it teaching players not enough when they really, to be successful, they should know more? So I think we're just going to have to see it come out. And then if you talk about, I didn't hear anything about different backs and stuff, but if that is the case, then you start to wonder for collectors, does it really fit into a collection or not? So
yeah, I mean, at the very least, it is just a one-off sealed product. It's not like you're having to buy booster packs or put a set together. If it's something you want in your collection, it's just one thing you go out and buy or you don't. I think it is probably going to be kind of a stepping stone between having no knowledge and getting to the Battle Academies. Because the Battle Academies, each deck comes with 1V. There's some slightly complex mechanics in there. I think this is going to be this one will teach you the absolute basics. Then Battle Academy will help you go a little bit further. And then you get into, the League Battle decks, things like that.
And you triggered my mind, Dan, when you were talking about just having to buy this one set. That might it might be a good discussion for another podcast to talk about some of these kind of one-off sets that do or don't fit. And somebody mentioned one, I think in one of our comments, was the Rumble set, and there's the one that the remember the disc game, Dan, where I had to buy the prototypes from you and stuff.
Oh, the trading figure game?
Yeah, the trading figure game is another one that comes to mind. So we could do something on that. But the one set that doesn't seem to fit, that reminds me of this battle deck, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a green and blue box. And in the very early days of Pokemon, and was like, do you remember anything about that? I might have one tucked away, but
not off the top of my head what you're talking about. I know Japan had like a Bulbasaur Squirtle pair of decks, but I'm assuming that's not what you're talking about.
No, it's something like this though. It was something like
Yeah.
kind of a play deck kind of thing, but it was just a blue and green kind of deck that had different backs and different cards, but was just kind of another one-off. So haven't really
Okay.
seen or heard of anything from that for a long time until this. So
Yeah, we'd have to look into that. It's not something I remember, and
okay.
different backs things from that time.
Yeah, less
Um,
drugs will help with the memory, Dan. Just keep that in mind.
yeah. Yeah, following on from mentioning about it teaching the younger players, Laura actually told me they've, for the first time ever, put a lower age limit on being able to play in tournaments, because it used to just be, the juniors division was 10 and younger, or based on a certain year. But now they've apparently said players younger than 6 can't play in tournaments. So even in the junior division, you have to be at least 6 years old to actually enter a tournament rather than just playing at league.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know that we do a lot of basketball coaching here, and I'm not sure this is the reason or not, but one of the things is when you get kids that are too young playing with other kids, it really can hinder the progress of the kids or the enjoyment of the experience, because there's a lot of progress between like 6, 7, 8. Each
Yeah,
year makes a lot of difference. We really have trouble with 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds especially, but 7-year-olds, they're sort of more apt to be able to handle the knowledge, what we're teaching them, and the physical skills necessary. So I would just
yeah,
think they're trying to make a better experience for the uh,
probably,
more
and
capable players that are a bit older.
give the younger kids, let them have a bit more time, going to league and stuff, learning how to play the game a bit more before they jump into the tournament setting.
Yeah, makes sense.
Two other quick bits of news that I had. So I did make a video this week opening up the new products that came out this weekend. It was 2 battle decks, the Chen Pao EX and Tinkerton EX decks. Those came out this weekend, and also a new EX box for Annihilate EX. So those products are now out. They were announced a little while back, just came out this weekend. So anyone who picks up the products, that's the new product to look out for this week.
Dan, I don't have time to watch your video this week, and I'm ashamed of myself and you, but I'd like to say, Dan, can you answer a question so I know what the answer is, Dan?
Sure.
Is there a variance in either 1, 2, or 3 of all those products so I know if I would like to pick them up or not?
All products have some either promo or variant or a mix in them, yeah.
All right, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Save me a lot of time. I appreciate it. And that's my reward for waiting this long to get to the end of this podcast.
Yeah. Our last bit of news is for the World Championships. They actually announced just today that the Pokemon Center at the World Championships, will not be selling a deck box, as they have basically every year as far back as I can remember. I think back to about 2012, they started doing the double deck box, but they announced today that that product and another style of deck box that they'd announced would not be featured at the World Championships. They just said they had to discontinue them for unforeseen circumstances. They haven't given any more details. So if you are someone who, collects every year's of Worlds merch, you're going to have a gap in that double deck box collection. I know that's one product that me and Laura have for pretty much every year since they've done them, but that was something that was announced today.
Very interesting, Dan. I think the secret that, if the people were paying just to hear your Patreon, they would understand what this is really about. But the rumor is, since no one's watching Patreon, Dan, but they're going to get on at some point. But the reason behind this, what I've heard, and it's pretty clear at this point, is they're going to use all of that additional labor and time and merchandise and manufacturing capability to produce backpacks. They want to remedy the backpack situation and try to get a few more of those out there for Worlds. So I'm hopeful. I'm also hopeful they set their appointments for every 5 minutes instead of every 15, so we can get a few more people through.
The appointments for the World's Pokemon Center are a lot more limited than they are for NAIC.
Ridiculous! Don't get me started. I can't wait anymore.
You had to enter a lottery. One of my friends who I'm going with won a spot in the lottery, but also because I won the lottery for my spectator badge. Spectators, when you go and pick up your spectator badge, will also get assigned a time for the Pokemon Center. So I'm at least going to get through twice, so I can hopefully pick up most of the stuff I want.
Okay, good. I wish you all the best, Dan.
Yeah. And you had some news, you said?
Yeah, just really interesting. Of course, my world collides much more with just Pokemon. David, talk. Can you get it out of there? Yeah, it's coming out. Your voice didn't sound right, but it doesn't matter. It's still saying the same thing. Dan, this week, what I read a lot about, because I intersect with both the Pokemon and sports world quite a bit, is this former professional football player, Blake Martinez, is all over the national news this week because he's saying that he gave up his football career to start his Pokemon business. And he's now employing 20 employees. He's making $11.5 million a year on Blake's Breaks. That's what he calls his business, Blake's Breaks. And it's just interesting. It's interesting to hear a very young person do his videos about what he thinks is going to be good investment wise with not, doesn't have a clue. He's just talking, nice guy. All of the hype and all of the facial gestures around the pack breaks and the same stuff we've been used to. None of these guys, by the way, I'm not getting into the ring with Blake Martinez. I'm not that stupid. Maybe unlisted Lee Thando or Leon Hart, because I don't care at this point. Let's just do this. But it was really interesting, all of the detail that the articles talked about, as well as he's got other people and other football people watching him that are waiting to possibly end their careers and come in as well now. But just, again, so much more national publicity for this hobby and its continuous hype. And he talked a lot about one generation passing on to their kids and to their grandkids. So I guess going back to my rant, maybe there's a reason I'm really not too old. Maybe I am too old and I should be passing it on at this point. I don't know. Good news, Dan.
Yeah, I've seen him in the news a couple of times. I think he's been going for a year or two now. I think he kind of followed it sort of in the footsteps of Cassius Marsh, who was a football player who, when he retired from the NFL, got very heavily into Magic the Gathering. I think he was a player of it for a long time, and then when he retired, he got a bit more into buying and selling cards and playing it much more frequently. So I think Blake came after him, but I think he's been around a little while. I remember Blake Martinez was involved in the sale of an Illustrator a while back, which I think boosted his profile quite a bit. When you have when the media is looking at Pokemon, they're not as interested in I sold 11 million over a year, but if you say I sold this one card for $750,000, that's the big story to them. So stuff like that is always going to boost the profile quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a little reel on that as well that I think that he had sent away or whatever for it, and it never came. And then he kept worrying and worrying and worrying, and all of a sudden the card showed up from Japan or whatever. So yeah. And I think it was over $600,000. So
yeah. All right, so this is a bit of a wrap up now before we play whatever our ending game is. This is the end of the main Pokemon section of the podcast, so we want to say thank you guys for listening. Make sure to check us out on social medias. We are Instagram at Koffee Talks Pokemon, TikTok at Koffee Talks Pokemon. There's not very much on the TikTok now. There's one video. I'm still learning how to do TikToks and Instagram Reels. You have to bear with me. We're on Twitter at Koffee Talks Poke. And yeah, those are the three places you'd follow us, as well as if you're listening to just an audio version of this, you can see the video podcasts, youtube.com/DJ Gigabyte. That's where we upload all of that. David, over to you. Do your Ferris Bueller stuff, and then we'll do whatever we're doing after that.
Yeah, guys, don't leave. Don't leave. Where are you guys going? It's a fake ending. Do you understand? No, it's not really. It really is the ending because you guys have been on here so long and you've been so kind to watch everything we've done that it's time to go, okay? So if you're still sitting here, why are you sitting here, even though we're going to do another segment in a minute? Yeah. Don't stay. Leave, okay? Don't leave your popcorn behind. Clean it up. Clean up your drink. Make it easy for the people cleaning out the theaters. And then at this point, Dan and I are just going to talk. And should you decide you want to hear a little bit more about something that's worth not hearing about, hang around. If not, go and get on with your day. Get on with your life. Just like at the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off or at the end of Deadpool, where he then mimicked that same thing. Dan, are you ready for our new game today? Dan, we've played True or False in the past. We have played Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Clearly, I was, but Pikachu was not. Yeah. And this week, Dan, we're going to play a game I call 3 Questions. Are you ready, Dan?
Sure.
Finally, let's play a game before we go.
Okay, Dan, here we go. Dan, first question. What did you eat for dinner last night?
I had a McDonald's last night. I had a large 10-piece nugget meal. Actually, I gave 5 of the nuggets to Laura. So I had 5 chicken nuggets, a large fries, a large Coke, and 2 hamburgers, no pickle, no onion. That's my go-to McDonald's order.
Okay, first of all, thank you for being honest with your answer. Number 2, I don't think it's really up to you to say what Laura was eating. That's up to her, okay? So, if a true confessions of a bad husband, we don't talk about what our wives are eating. They can eat what they want. They can do what they want. And we don't tell the world without their That basically goes with everything to do with a wife. You just got to get their affirmation first. Okay. Do you understand that, Dan?
Yeah, if there's a huge bleep in the podcast earlier, you'll know that I ran it past Laura and she told me not to tell people what she'd eaten.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, Dan, the next thing is when you eat that food, and boy, Dan, that's quite a lot of consumption of food. So obviously, you hadn't eaten for much of the day, or very hungry, or have a tremendous caloric intake. Dan, do you eat them side by side or one at a time? Because there are people that eat those hamburgers, and what they do is they just down a whole hamburger, and then they have a French fry or the whole French fries. Or that. Are you interspersing, Dan? Is there a bite of hamburger and a bite of French fry? What are we doing?
No, it was section at a time. Fries first, then the nuggets, then the hamburgers.
Okay, so and I'd like you to explain the reason behind the ordering of the items, Dan. Is it a best to last, a worst to first, a first to last, or a worst to first?
Well, for those McDonald's, it's because McDonald's fries get horrible if they go even slightly cold. You have to get McDonald's fries down as quick as you can. You cannot give them any time to sit out or they just turn into the worst thing ever. And then with the nuggets, I think I just do the nuggets before the hamburgers because it's less reaching over to my plate. I dip the nuggets off my plate and then I just pick the hamburgers up and I just lean back in the chair and eat the hamburgers.
Dan, even if that was all true and I could agree with everything you said, I want you to know I would definitely not do both hamburgers at once unless I was such a huge fan of the hamburgers that I had to save them for last, okay? Because I would at least go, okay, let me do 5 nuggets and a hamburger, or a hamburger, then the nuggets, then a hamburger. Because you get to enjoy the hamburgers over a longer period of time. Does that make sense, Dan?
It does make sense. It's probably ADHD related, is why I do
It
that.
could
I
be,
have
man.
no
This is
idea.
like medicine. You might want to up the dose. And then I'll tell you a little story about hot French fries because I do watch my wife and I can talk about this. She's proud of the fact that our favorite programs are all crime dramas, which is why at some point one of us will end up not alive and the other one's going to be on trial for the other one's passing. But here's the deal. Hot French fries actually convinced one time a magistrate to press charges against someone because it was known in the British community. It wasn't here. I think it was Canada, actually, that in the Canadian province of where these French fries were made, everyone ate them immediately because they didn't taste good unless they were eaten immediately. So the fact that they were still sitting on the table uneaten told the story and contradicted the wife's account of where she was and how she would have not been there, etc. She would have never left without eating them and then looked for her husband, etc. So Dan, I appreciate your French fry story. Nonsense. You might want to, you might want to consider interspersing some of these things. Sometimes a few different delectable or delicious tastes can make the meal taste all the better. Dan, obviously, I don't need to ask you the second part of that question because you certainly didn't cook. Dan, what's the last thing that you and Laura argued about? And I know it has to be the last thing, so it can't be that you're going to argue about the fact that you just gave away her dinner menu items for last night.
Last argument. Oh. It was probably just over. Oh, she was planning out our Disney trip a month in advance. And I think she had been talking for about 30 minutes nonstop. And I just said, we're not going for another month. We don't need to decide now what order we're going on the rides in. Because she had the map up and she was like, oh, well, this ride has an 80-minute wait time if we do. So we maybe want to get to that first. And this ride only has a 10-minute wait time. So, Laura, we're not going for another month. We can decide on the order of the rides closer to the time. I don't need to hear about it anymore. And then, of course, there was a little bit of an argument about how I did need to hear about it right now.
Well, I understand, and this would be a good time for all those that aren't listening anymore to throw in a comment here because, Dan, that's ridiculous, buddy. What are you thinking? I mean, what was it that you didn't have enough time to listen to her story because you had to go film a podcast of another Paldea Evolved opening? You can only open 12 or 15 or 1,000 boxes, Dan, before people have said, hey, you've seen every card, so you should listen to Laura sometimes. And Dan, how does that bode for the commentary about, okay, now you guys are talking about having children and you're like, well, we don't have to have one for another 8 months, so I don't want to talk about it. Dan, come on. Some of us are not last minute, fly by the seat of our pants people. Can you not understand her position at all in this?
Right, for a start, we're not having the conversation about having children. Laura's family are having the conversation about us having children. I'm not saying we have to wait till the last minute to plan the order we're going on the rides. I'd heard enough about Disney for that time. She went on a long talk about Duffy, who is the Disney bear that we're going to see in Tokyo, And I think eventually I just had to say, I just need a minute of quiet. I just need quiet for 5 minutes.
So you're thinking that a better situation for Laura to maybe have said to you, hey, Dan, we'll do this on the 27-hour flight over. We can spend our time while we're sitting in a plane doing nothing, and we could probably figure this out.
Could have been, or just we didn't need to figure everything out in one go. That's all it would have been.
Dan, good communication is a good key to a good relationship. So it's important to say, hey, I need a break from you right now. Get the heck away. And then you start up again another time. Dan, my final question today, because I know you love everything Pokemon and that's all you seem to love, or maybe that's me. I'm not sure. Dan, if you had the money, the financial resources, don't give me think this one through for a minute, buddy.
Okay.
What would your highest priority Pokemon card acquisition be at this point in time?
If I had unlimited money, probably
maybe not unlimited, but maybe enough money to be able to get
money.
One thing that's on your list that you would just love to check off. That maybe it's not a check off because you don't have it. Maybe you love your Fire Red Leaf Green set so much you want another one. I don't know, Dan.
So
stop putting words in your mouth. Just give me an answer.
So what I think I would go for, if I had the funds for any of it, would be a full art trophy card set. Because I have the half art set, I think it would look very nice to have the full art trophy set next to it. I've basically written off the chance of me getting those anytime soon, just because of how expensive they've gotten in my financial situation and stuff. So that would be one where, if money is no object, or I have enough money to buy it, I would like to get a full art trophy set.
So can you remind me, I know you've said this before, but I guess I wasn't down in the weeds enough. You have all 4 of the half arts?
Yes, I have the 4 half arts. They're from different years, but I have all 4 of them. And I don't have any
full arts or no?
No full arts.
Okay. And I think it's important to point out that Laura has none of these.
Laura also has no full arts or half art trainers.
That's the only way we could ever put the sweet lady down. She's got everything else that you don't have. Okay, so that's a good selection, Dan. That's good to know. I appreciate it. Thanks for the clarification, and thanks for playing 3 questions.
Cool. Are we done now? Is that everything you wanted to say?
We are done, man. We just can't keep going because the concession stands have closed down and the theater is all shut down at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully everyone did enjoy. Hopefully you'll join us again next week for another podcast.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to have a